Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your Lunch Break Live. My name is Ivana. If you are new here, if you're not, thank you for coming back. I know I say morning, I should say afternoon. This is a late edition of your Lunch Break Live, and that is because this morning on AL.com, we aired the White House press briefing where the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, and an administrator from the EPA discussed the Colonial Pipeline shutdown. We aired that this morning because so many of us have been talking about this shutdown, have really been talking about the issues we are seeing in Alabama and those that we aren't really seeing in Alabama. So I thought it would be a good idea to come here, recap that press conference for some of us maybe who didn't get to see it or who maybe didn't understand the background of that. So we're going to talk about what was said at that press conference and what is exactly going on with that pipeline. I am joined by our own reporter, Bill Thornton, today. He has been covering this shutdown, I believe now in its fifth day, and has been covering the effects from that. So, Bill, we just sat here and we watched a White House press briefing. We cut it off a little bit early, but we really were looking for that Colonial Pipeline news. So let's start out by talking about what happened in that White House press briefing, and then we can kind of go backwards if we need to as to how all of this started. So first of all, what did we learn this morning from that briefing?
Well, the pipeline is getting the pipeline back online is still projected for sometime this weekend. In the meantime, the administration wants to get across the idea or the message that they are working to get supply to places where there has been, shortages, closed stations, mostly. You have to remember that the pipeline itself supplies about 45% of the gas to the eastern United States. But that's just, that's less than half. So you have tankers, you have sea-going vessels, you have trains, you have trucks on the road, and you also have other pipelines which allow the gas to flow to those places. The thing that the administration is trying to do now is use the regs and the existing modes of transportation to get gasoline to those places that need them. This is categorized by a lot of people as a supply problem, but it's really a distribution problem. The gas is there, the petroleum is there, the refineries have a lot of gas, they just can't get it to the places that need it, and that's the issue. So what the administration is trying to do is, for example, loosen some of the regs about how much gasoline you can transport on the roads, and also tap into those ways to get the gas to the places that are affected right now.
Now, I wrote down a few notes from that I'm going to reference here. And we had the EPA administrator, Michael Reagan. He spoke about some of those regulations like you're talking about, and he called those fuel waivers. And he said that those will help, quote, alleviate supply shortages, end quote. So like you said, that just helps get that gasoline to where it needs to go and to those areas that are so affected by this. Now, he also said that those waivers are just in place for right now while the country gets this situation handled, and that those waivers will end at some point and those regulations will go back to being enforced at that point. Now, we also heard from the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, excuse me, and he had a quote I thought was interesting. He said, quote, "This is a time to be sensible and be safe," end quote. And what he was referring to there, I believe, is that people almost are creating more of a problem in some spots than should be there because of hoarding gas, overfilling, filling plastic jugs. I know Governor Ivey said yesterday, do not panic, do not hoard, because that makes the situation worse. Bill, what can you add about that?
Okay, so basic capitalism. If you have a large demand for a product, that means that the price will go up, especially if you have a tight supply. So what we're doing is when we go out to buy gas, to make sure that we get it before the price goes up, we are ensuring that the price will go up because we are taking supply away. As I said, this is not a supply problem as much as it is a distribution problem. Right now, 98% of the gas stations in the state of Alabama have gas, okay? But if we keep going and buying gas, to fill up tank after tank after tank. Yesterday, I was at a gas station and I saw a man filling up 5 cans of gas. He did not want to talk to the media, I can assure you. But anyway, what happens though is that that's less gas for somebody else to buy, which means that that's going to drive the price up. It's also going to create a supply problem when the pipeline does reopen, which it will, and that means that the price will be up, high for longer. So I mean, this is really basic stuff. I can understand people don't want to pay a lot for gas, but what you're doing is you're ensuring that you're going to pay a lot for gas when you do this. And we're only talking about a week's worth of doing this. Just being sensible will be cheaper in the long run.
That's probably true for a lot of things, Bill. Now, something that I do think is probably necessary to say is I don't think that this is necessarily a partisan issue. Everybody needs gas at some point.
Yeah.
I don't care what side of the aisle you sit on, your car. Now, maybe you have a Tesla and that's great, but you probably are going to need to go to the gas station. So that is something that is affecting all of us. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you want. It doesn't matter where you live. You are in the Eastern United States, Southeast. It is going to be something that is talked about in your community, something that could affect you. Now, I was using one of my phones here to pull up a tweet, and this kind of went viral this morning, and Secretary Buttigieg actually mentioned it. This was from the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, a federal agency, a legitimate agency, we should say, for the record. And they said, do not fill plastic bags with gasoline. Now, the secretary mentioned that today, and he said, look, you only need to use approved containers for fuel or in your vehicle. Do not, if you are going to go out and put extra gasoline in your containers, which they're not advising, but if you do, make sure it's in one of those certified containers. But I thought it was interesting. That was even something that the Secretary of Transportation had to address at the White House briefing.
Yeah, and we ought to note that most people know that that's not what you do with gasoline. One of the aspects of social media that we're all familiar with is that it can take one isolated incident and make it the poster child for, irresponsible behavior, and also encourage other people to take up that irresponsible behavior, which is kind of what we're seeing right now. And it's also part of, this kind of panic mode that we get in, and especially in the last year, probably because of the pandemic. We went through the whole thing with toilet paper, poultry products, and whenever people feel that their lives are being disrupted in a way, they act in a way, that in some ways makes it worse because they, for whatever reason, understandably panic. Everybody needs gas. Everybody's got to travel. So, you don't want to, you don't want to be caught without. But again, we're right now, as of this morning, only about less than 2% of the gas stations in the state of Alabama did not have gas. Less than 2%. Most of those, from what I understand, are on the coast. And that has to do not just with the pipeline, but also with a supplier out of Pensacola that was shut down for a while. And the panic buying that we've talked about. Now, in Atlanta, for example, about 60% of the stations are out. Now, and that's one of the things that we're seeing is that this is happening in very large metro areas where people are just panic buying gas like crazy.
Now, I'm glad you said that. That probably, that could probably be one of the takeaways from this recap, right? That's about 2% of gas stations in Alabama are out of gas. Not a lot here in Alabama. So it doesn't present a reason for people to panic, to need to go out to fill up. Now, I think it's a good time to mention this. I got an alert on my phone here just a few minutes before we went live from a source, and it says that the U.S. gas shortage is causing people to hoard ridiculous amount of gas. Here are 18 photos to show how chaotic it is. Now, I know you mentioned earlier, we see these things on social media, and they almost make you panic because you think, oh, everybody else is panicking, I should panic as well. But 2% of gas stations, that's not very much here in Alabama.
No. And again, when you look at these photos, you have to remember that that's probably less than 1% of the population. Most people are going about their business. Most people are, they're filling up when they have to. They're looking for bargains like everybody else, but they're not thinking that the apocalypse is upon us.
Comment here from Angela said she tried 2 stores before stopping at a third because they had no gas in Opelika. Now, Angela, I've seen some of that here in the surrounding areas of Birmingham as well, and even some gas stations that might have one grade of gas but are out of some of those other grades. Now, a question here from Jessica, and this is also a very important question. I'm glad you asked, Jessica. She said, "When is this going to get better? When do we expect this to improve?"
Okay, so what we have seemed to have forgotten is that we went through this about 5 years ago with the Colonial Pipeline. It was shut down for a while because of a leak and afterwards a fire that originated in Alabama, and it lasted about a week, just a week. There was a similar panic. This is a little bit bigger because of the scope, along the eastern seaboard and everything. But I would imagine that if the pipeline, and the wild card here, of course, is getting the pipeline back online completely. But we could be sitting here in a week and we've moved on to the next outrage or whatever it is. So most of the people who examine this, who are in the petroleum industry, will say that what we're seeing right now should alleviate itself once the pipeline is back up, and everybody expects that by this weekend.
Again, I was going to say that was something that was mentioned this morning at that White House press briefing from all parties involved, that they expected that pipeline to be back online by the end of the week. No definite day, but end of the week. Now, a question here that I think is kind of presents itself is, you mentioned about 2% of gas stations in Alabama are out of their gas. Then you look at a place like Atlanta, where you said about 60% are out of gas. We look at some of those more metropolitan areas are seeing less, having less gas than others. Why is Alabama only at about 2%? And then just right over the border in Georgia, they're looking at such a bigger number. Is that because of the pipeline that supplies our gasoline, or what exactly is that reason there?
Well, okay, so Georgia doesn't have as big a problem as North Carolina. North Carolina, I believe, according to Gas Buddy, about a quarter of the stations in the entire state are out of gas. And you're seeing maybe 70% outages in Raleigh, Charlotte. I think part of it has to do with distribution. Alabama gets some of their gasoline from the Gulf rather than the pipeline. You're seeing some outages in Florida also, who also gets it from the Gulf, but I would imagine some of it just has to do with, you have these large population centers where people have more access to gas stations, so they go and they raid them, trying to get as much gas as possible. You don't see that in rural areas as much, and some of it may just be a function of what day does your station get its gas supply. Yesterday, about 5 miles from my house in Etowah County, the gas station that I usually go to was out of gas overnight. But at 9 o'clock, pumper truck shows up. Here we go again, and that was basically, what day do you get gas? What day does your station get the gas? So while we're talking about this pipeline, all those other modes of gas distribution are continuing, and in some cases getting ramped up, which was the message that the White House wanted to get out today.
That's a really interesting point, Bill. You say that some of these stations that might be out, they might not be out because of a pipeline issue. They might be out because of panic buying, and then they just haven't restocked. Just like so many of us, you go to your local grocery store and you try to get, your tuna or whatever you're looking for, and they're out. It's not because there's necessarily a run on that product. It's because of the delivery dates. That's a really interesting point.
If I could say this, last year we went through something similar to this during the pandemic, in terms of toilet paper, in terms of poultry, and you would talk to people who were in those industries. Are we running out of toilet paper? No. Are we running out of poultry? No, we're not. The problem is getting it to the places where it's processed and where it's distributed. That's where the bottleneck is happening. As when somebody explained to me yesterday, this is not a situation where we are running out of gas. It's just getting it to the places that it needs to go. And that's a really large machine that has a lot of moving parts. And when there is a disruption at one place, it tends to trigger all of these other effects in other places. And, suddenly people get kind of panicky because they go to the store and they don't see the toilet paper, or they don't see the chicken, or they don't see, detergent or whatever, and they think there must be a larger problem, when in reality, it's just that it's not the day that comes in. Everybody came in and bought the stuff, but it's on its way.
That's a really good point, Bill. Let's wrap this up with the key points here from the White House and in general. So number one, coming from the White House this morning, we had EPA Administrator Michael Regan saying that the EPA, meaning they are going to create some waivers to allow gasoline to get where it needs to go in a timely fashion. That is, one of those points. Number two, we had Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg say to quote, "This is a time to be sensible and be safe." Said that he and other federal officials are in touch with the company and are providing help there, and also trying to get that pipeline back online. And again, Bill, as you said, kind of the in general takeaway here is that it's not a shortage problem; it's a distribution problem.
And a good rule to go by in any situation like this is to remain calm. This is, I don't have to tell people how the United States has a lot of resources that at its disposal. And what you're seeing right now is all the arms of the federal government and the oil industry and everybody else is trying to solve this problem, because they know there's a demand for gas, and any good business person wants to supply that demand when it's there. So, just sit tight and don't hoard and don't use plastic bags and all that other stuff. And we should be fine.
Wise words coming out of you today, Bill Thornton. For more on this pipeline shutdown, for all of your gas news right now, please tune into AL.com. We have linked Bill's latest story here in the comment thread, so you can kind of go over what we just talked about and see some of those percentage numbers we were talking about. So, Bill, thank you. I know you're going to be keeping us updated on the gas shortage. And everybody, live by Bill's words of wisdom, stay safe. And this is probably a good reminder for a lot of us, like myself, who push that meter past the E a little bit too often. So that is you. I feel you. I understand you. But everybody, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Be safe out there.